What's up, everybody? It's waba, and I wanted to kind of do a postmortem on the Acrobatics Mind Over Matter Voltaxic Trickster. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but I wanted to do a postmortem on the build and kind of talk about where I think its potential lies and what exactly needs to be done to it or with it for it to work. And I just wanted to share my thoughts so everyone can know what's out there. And so maybe, in me doing this, someone could pick it up where I left off and actually work on it as well. I know a few people said that they're going to, but like I said, I just wanted to put it all out there. So in this video, I'm going to go through what I think the potentially perfect gear setup is. And yeah, pretty much that. Perfect gear setup, perfect passive tree, and ascendancies with a little bit of explanation of all of it. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. First off, let's go ahead and start with the passive tree. Now, I'm also going to use this video as a way to kind of share this cool tool that, this tool that Cremail, regular on my Twitch stream, which was he's actually a really big contributor to my stream and also a lot of the things that I do. He helps out a lot. He throws ideas at me, and sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't, but he helps out a lot. And something that he showed me recently was this tool called Path of Building, which is essentially an offline skill tree planner. But what I really like about it is you can actually look up an account. As long as the account isn't private, it will give you a drop down of all the characters on the account, and you could actually load tree and gear from that character. So it's a really good way to look at another account player's build or like a streamer. So maybe you don't necessarily have to go to the forum thread each time. If you know their account name, which for mine is pretty simple, it's waba, just the same as my Twitch, and it's just a really easy way to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my level 88 trickster in standard, and I'm going to load the passive tree and jewels and the items and the skills. So from here, let's check it out. So this is where the skill tree is now. And one of the big issues with this build is definitely the life. As you can see, it only has 157% increased life from the tree. So it's really low on that side of it. And you can see that I have some jewels here. I think this jewel is just a placeholder for right now. Obviously, you'd want like a life projectile damage and damage over time jewel, or projectile damage or chaos damage jewel. Kind of similar to this one. The 6% chance to knock back enemies on hit is actually kind of a gimmick, but it kind of worked out. But this is the tree as it is right now. Not really a lot of life. Even with acrobatics, you could get more. I was only level 88, but when you're saying you're level 88, you got to keep in mind that realistically, that means you have another 4 levels. Like before, if your build doesn't start to like really take off between like level 82 and 85, it takes a lot of effort to push through those later 80 levels and early 90s. So ideally, I'd like to have this build in a certain state by level 90, and it just wasn't really close. So you could get a couple, some more life through things like profane chemistry here, and then you could grab some of these nodes over here for a little bit of life, but none of these are really that worthwhile. But what I ultimately think would be best is if you were to use a Calm's Heart. And the reason why I say a Calm's Heart is because if you used a Calm's Heart, you would be speccing up to Mind Over Matter. Now, here's the one issue with that though. In patch 2.6 that's coming up, supposedly there are going to be nodes behind Mind Over Matter. So depending on how good those nodes are behind Mind Over Matter, it could either be good for this build or bad for this build. The only reason why I mentioned going up here to Mind Over Matter and using a Calms is because it's about the only way you could get a decent enough life pool. With this build, I was sitting at just over 5k effective health pool with a Cloak of Defiance. So, and of course I'm using a Mind of the Council, which doesn't have that much life on it, but really it's pretty low, and that's the biggest issue with this build. The fact that you don't have a lot of life So you're really susceptible to being hit with these like massive, or you're just being susceptible to being one shot, like flat out. You could just get one shot with this build. So ideally, you know, this is going to be at 118 points, which is about level 96. At level 96, you could have a pretty good life pool, and you could have mind over matter with everything else, and you know, all these life nodes. So this is where, if you could get your build, that'd be fantastic. Now there are other things too, like these frenzy charges. These frenzy charges were really crucial to the damage or DPS output of this build, but because of that, you could drop them early, and if you could get a frenzy charge on your boots or on your amulet, that would help out a lot, because with our ascendancies, we are swift killer, one additional frenzy charge, and a little bit of duration. So, and eventually you would want to grab a frenzy charge, so you could get up to easily, you could get up to, let's see, 3, 2, 3, 6, 7, you could get up to 9 frenzy charges if you have it on your amulet and your boots, and with Swift Killer and the 2 frenzy charges in the passive tree. In this format, it doesn't look that bad. In fact, at this point, if you had a level 21 Spark and level 21 gems in a 6-link and a Kelm's Heart and everything, especially one of the new Legacy Kelm's Hearts, the foil Kelm's Hearts with 1,000 health on it, this would actually be pretty tanky. I think you would be looking at about 6.5k life with about 800 to 1,000 unreserved mana. So this is actually what I think the ideal situation would be for this build, passive tree wise. And I'll link this in the description down below so you guys could see it. So let's go ahead and look at the items now. This is another thing you could do. I'm going to go in the game to look at it, but this is just so you guys know. You could check it out. I have a Voltaxic Rift. I have a Drill Neck, Mind of the Council, Cloak of Defiance. At Zeri Steps, someone pointed out early on my stream, not early, but like a little bit before I died, that it would be better for me to use Winds of Change and then boots with resist on them, like one of the new boot bases. And I 100% agree with that. Some rings that have life, mana, chaos damage, and resist would be fantastic. So you'd want to do the Essence Craft. I believe it is the Essence Craft Envy to do that craft. And then a belt with a leather belt with as much life on it and as much resist on it as possible. And then your flask, Zeri's Promise is going to be a really strong flask. And then potentially a Vinctars with plus lightning damage to spells would be really good. And yeah, pretty much from there. And the jewels, that's another thing about this build. You actually do have 5 jewel sockets. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. You could potentially 5. You could potentially have 6, depending on what's going on up here behind this, right? If their damage taken gained as mana, it would actually be that much better. But for kind of unrelated reasons, that's a tangent. But you could have quite a bit of jewels in this build, and you know, I'm using 4 right now, but you could see that I have 6 open. I have 6 jewel slots right here, and I could kind of put in whatever I need to. And it's also showing other jewels. Whatever. That's besides that. Oh, that's actually really cool. This is a really cool tool. Cool tool. I've never really looked into it that much. So, and the skills. These are the skills I'm using right now. Let's just go ahead and go into the game for this because, well, while that was fantastic, it's about time. But this is also where I kind of want to talk about the Ascendancy a little bit. I'm a trickster in this build, and majority of players would dance game at trickster, and I understand why. You know, you're used to things like Raider, you're used to things like Deadeye, you're used to things like Assassin. Trickster, while being very good for, like, especially like a COC build, you know, it was meta for COC build for quite a while because you could get Walk the Ether in Shade form. Some of the other passives see a lot less use, and those are the ones I'm specifically using. Weave the Arcane is something that's not used a lot, but it actually does a fantastic job of maintaining your mana, and it's a great way to help you maintain your cost of everything and restore mana whenever you do take damage from it. And then Patient Reaper also increases your life and mana regeneration. So once you get more mana and once you get more life, your regeneration, since it's percentage based, will do better and better versus the damage you do, or versus the damage you take. So it will just get tankier and tankier, assuming that you have all those pieces of gear. And again, not again, but with Swift Killer, this is just an easy way for you to maintain some of your frenzy charges, and you could also pair this with a Victario's Acuity. And Victario's Acuity, that will give you 10% chance to get frenzy charges on kill and 10% chance to get power charges on kill. So you're going to get a little bit of crit out of this build in its ideal situation. But ultimately, you would generally always have frenzy charges up, which would do a lot for your damage. And if you could get a +1 frenzy charge, Victario's Acuity, that'd be fantastic too. But I wouldn't really worry about that. But then it comes in, why aren't you taking Shade Form? This is the thing that most people would want to take. Well, I don't really have that much energy shield, and I don't see you having that much energy shield in this build. So 20% fast start of energy shield recharge, that sucks. Like, it's not very useful for this build, especially when you're built around regenerating all of your resources instantly, essentially. Now, on top of that, it has the 5% chance to dodge attacks and spells, but you could easily have a Val Grace going while you have Phase Acrobatics. 5% chance to dodge attacks and spells, that's not really too much. So that's the first. I mean, while this 2-pointer isn't that bad, and maybe eventually you'll drop Swift Killer for this if you get to a certain level of gear, but Shade Form is not very good for this build at all. Again, with Acrobatics, you're taking 25, or you're taking half of that energy shield away immediately. 20% more chance to evade attacks while not on full energy shield. Well, your Acrobatics, you're going to be avoiding a lot of damage. I'm sorry. That was my son. You're going to be avoiding a lot of damage. So I don't really see it being that beneficial to you. So then the 20% increased attack and cast speed, that's really good when you are, regenerating your energy shield. But I don't see that happening too much. Like, it's just kind of a wash between Shade Form and Ghost Dance. It just doesn't make sense for the build. So, and you want that 20% attack speed. The 20% attack speed and cast speed, you want that because it would be very beneficial for you casting Spark. So that's why I think your final Ascendancy points would be Walk the Ether. Now, it makes it to where if you ever, and this is a scenario that may not happen very often, but it could potentially happen for sure, is let's just say you take a very large hit. You're never going to have I don't think you're going to have as much mana. I don't think you're ever going to have more mana than the ratio that Mind Over Matter would allow, if that makes any sense. So since you're not going to have more than realistically like 1,000 or 1,500 mana, if you take there's a small chance that you could take a very large hit and it will drain all of your mana and you'll have a little bit of life left over. Now let's just say in that scenario you need to use a movement skill and you can't cast it because even though you still have a lot of mana, or you have a lot of mana regen, let's just say in that one instance you don't have enough mana for a split second and you don't cast your Blink Arrow or Lightning Warp or whatever you decide to use. Walk the Ether would save you from that scenario. And the other thing I do like about it is the fact that it gives you the ability to give yourself a 20% attack and cast speed steroid on command whenever you want. That's actually kind of why I would prefer a Lightning Warp setup, but I could understand if you would use a Blink Arrow. So that's pretty much why I think the Ascendancy should be like this. There's probably another Ascendancy that you could use for this build, 100%. But I think this is potentially something that's really good. It just requires Comb's Heart. It just requires some really good jewels. You know, it requires you to be like level 92 and to have as many frenzy charges as possible. And I just want to give this information out there. I want it to be out there so people have a good idea of what's going on and what they could potentially do and the different things that you could do in Path of Exile. Is this a good league starter? No. It could be if you really wanted to do it. If you were really gung-ho on doing it, you could play whatever you want. And this build will succeed in a lot of scenarios, but it will struggle with others for sure until you get the gear and the levels that you need. So that's just like my breakdown of it. If you have any comments or any ideas for it, and you know, leave them down below. If you want to pick up where I left off on this build, I will leave a tree down in the link so you can see what I think would be ultimately be the best thing for you to use and the best gear setup, etc., etc. I wanted it to be out there because it was fun, and I think this build has potential. I can't say it enough. I think there's potential here, but you just, you know, you're gonna need really good gear, and I don't really have the means to do that in a challenge league unless I get really lucky. If I find a mirror, yeah, I could probably do this. But would I want to do that? I don't know. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.